want to highlight that for them, right? Okay. Okay.
Don, thank you for being here. Uh-oh, really? Oh, no. Okay, welcome everybody. I am reopening the same meeting, and I want to congratulate you all for your stamina. This is part 3 of the same meeting, and we very much appreciate the community's enthusiasm and willingness to follow this through, and of course the staff's willingness to support the community in this effort, because I think we are making progress, and it is a little tough to do this from the dais. We all prefer to sit around the table. I think we've always all preferred that, but we don't have the technology in this room to do that and still broadcast it to the Zoom group. So it really has handicapped. Actually, when I have a bunch of papers out here, I am really physically limited to what I can see and look at in terms of working on an active project. So it's a tough thing. So after the meeting yesterday, since Melanie and I were the folks, the two of the committee who had submitted the most, I don't know, the most homework, but also the homework that conflicted the most, because Doug was sort of on my draft of my homework. Melanie and I sat down yesterday and combined our documents just so that we would have one working draft for the group. So these two on my far left and right have not seen it yet, except for right now. The public has not seen it yet, except in
here, Carol.
And even Melanie, since I typed it up myself last night, Melanie hasn't seen the final draft either. It's not a final draft. I don't mean to use that language. It's just the latest draft. So what Melanie and I did is we actually started at the top again and just made sure that we could reconcile our two drafts, our two homeworks. And what we learned, and you'll chime in, Melanie, if you want to correct what I'm saying. What I learned anyway is that actually it was quite easy to distribute these subheadings under the 6 principles. And what we've found is one of the reasons that sometimes it was a little sticky is that sometimes the subheadings were actually very complex. And so in a couple cases, and I'll highlight those here in a second, we just, 3 cases, we just divided, like you'd have a sentence that was trying to do 2 totally different things in the sentence. And as soon as we divided the sentence into 2 sentences, then it fell into place very easily. So let me give you an example. If you look at 2.0, which is about subordinating your built work to the natural environment and the site, there's something 7.2, which used to be 7.2, it says 7.2A now. And then if you look over at the category 3.0, fit every built structure into its neighborhood context, you see 7.2B. That used to be one sentence, 7.2. And the sentence used to say, minimize the mass of a building as seen from the public way and from adjacent properties. Well, one of them is about the public forest and what we can see from the street, and the other is about respecting your neighbors. So we just split the sentence into 2 things, and it fell into place perfectly. And we did that the same thing with, you can see under 2.0 subordinate, we have 11.7b, and arbor should not dominate the street. Obviously, that's about the subordination to the forest. But it used to say, if you go over, flip it over to the bottom of the entire thing under details, 11.7a, an arbor should be integral to the fence or wall design. Well, that's about how you detail a project and how you, so these are two totally different principles that were in the same sentence. So it was super easy to actually just make it flow once we realized that some of these headings were actually too complex and trying to handle too many things in one sentence. So, and you know, a big caveat here is, of course, that we are working with information that's 20 years old, and this is just an exercise like a warm-up. So totally provisional. All this vocabulary, I'm sure, is going to change when we get the draft. We will, but we've warmed up. We now have our muscles warm to do this when we get the actual information from the consultants and the staff. Then one other thing I wanted to highlight is that, you know, this whole committee has been searching for, and we're still doing it, refining these principles, these sentences that we hope will be memorable to the public and will be super easy way to evaluate projects. Does a proposed project accomplish these 6 things? It's a low number, and they're big concepts. And I actually, of all people, I think I'm a good test guinea pig, because if I can't remember these as the person who is talking about them all the time, and then we've still got a problem. So Melanie and I started tweaking the principles a little bit more in their formatting, a couple new words, but as you'll see in this copy, each principle now starts with an action verb, which when I realized myself that I could all of a sudden remember the rest of the sentence as soon as I remembered preserve, subordinate, fit, retain, design, and detail. So preserve automatically makes me think of a nature preserve in the forest. Subordinate is, of course, about the relationship of the man-made to the natural. Fit has to do with your neighbors. To retain is about retaining heritage, so that's another context. Oh, and that's the other thing. And then design and detail gets into the building itself and the details of the building. So it's sort of, the other thing we did, Melanie and I, is we're trying on for size the rearranging, just slight reordering of the principles so that they're really funneling from the most important thing, which is the biggest natural, like what was here before we showed up as human creatures in Carmel, the forest, down to the subordination to that, down to the neighborhoods we've built, down to the history of that, and then the design of the massing of the building, and then the details. So it's really much more of a logical funnel, we thought, rearranged this way, but now is a chance for everybody else to take a look and weigh in. We do not have to, I think, since we feel like we've reconciled this, and that's what we were trying to do in the second part 2 of this meeting, Melanie and I at least don't feel like we need to spend time reconciling it today, but totally willing to hear any objections or tweaks or edits, rearrangings. If you guys can take a couple minutes to take a look. It's not that different. There was a lot of confluence between what Melanie and I already had done when we took these 2 independent versions. But take a look for a couple minutes, and meanwhile, while people are looking, anyone who has any thoughts, Melanie, maybe you want to say a few words on the same exercise that you and I just did.
Well, I think we accomplished a tremendous amount yesterday.
Is your mic on?
Oh, I don't know. Sure. Am I on?
Yeah.
We spent a great deal of time yesterday trying to get this ready for the meeting today, so that we could make some real decisions on the homework. And it was wonderful. I'm just going to segue into Nori for a second to get this memo from Nori today, and that he thinks this is very helpful and that he is very supportive of it. So it makes all of us, I think, feel better knowing that that the work we've been doing for the last 3 meetings has been well appreciated. And I think that it was extremely important for Victoria and I to really take a fresh look at the guiding principles once we had finished, organizing the 20-year-old design guidelines, what fit in which principles. We started looking at, as Victoria mentioned, we started looking at the principles themselves and decided that we really did need to do some refinement and of the key principles themselves. And so that's what led us to get the preserve and restore and enhance the forest. I was very concerned and that there's nothing that talks about really preserving the forest. And that is, we can restore and yada yada, but we have to agree that the forest is the primary thing that we're trying to really protect. And so we think that the preserve, restore, and enhance gives it more power, gives it more importance, and so that's why you'll see that there. And we hope that the committee will agree with that, and also obviously the public. And as Victoria explained, I think it's extremely important that we have our upside down pyramid, so to speak, where we've got the forest is the main element in this that we want to work with, that we think is the most important, and that needs everything that's man-made in terms of structures is subordinate to that and protects and preserves it. So I don't want to take any more time. We're limited today, but I was thrilled that Nori appreciated what we were doing, understood what we were doing, and I appreciated his comments and all of the ideas that he shared with us in his memo today. So,
and
Victoria?
I want to, and thank you. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more when we get. Hopefully, we'll see, because I'm going to take out to the public right now. But we will see when we get to 5 on our original agenda about the update from the consultant and the staff. And so this will dovetail nicely. We can discuss Nori's thoughts then too. And I see that he's with us. So thanks, Nori, for being here, as always. Okay, so I don't know if that gave you enough time to glance over this as we were sort of summarizing, but I want to open up to the public. I again realized yesterday or the day before how unfortunate it is that we can't sit around the table and do this technologically yet, and maybe that's something for the to-do list someday in the future for City Hall. But let's see who in the room would like to comment if you have any thoughts. David, thanks for coming.
Hi, David O'Neill. Good morning. I think this is brilliant. Well done. I like it very much. It's really going to be easy to use and clear, and I like it a lot. We probably would like to, at the future, maybe have an opportunity to make some adjustments to some of the wording, but this is, again, just an exercise. So, a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone? Ditto from Carol. Okay, that's nice.
Oh, we appreciate that, Carol.
Ken is still studying. Anyone from the Zoom room want to weigh in from what they've been able to digest so far? And I will open up again. Okay.
Victoria?
Yes.
Carol, could I say something?
Yes, of course. I can't see who's talking.
Carolyn Walker Davis.
Oh, Carolyn. Okay, go ahead, Carolyn.
I think this is really brilliant too, the way it's being simplified, and we go from big to small, which is the way architects think. Is Brandon there today? Yeah.
I am. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, Brandon. Quick question for you. We touched upon the other day, the 45% FAR, and I wondered, is that consistent throughout the entire city limits for residential?
It is, I believe. Yeah. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd want to be able to look at the zoning code because that shows up in the zoning code side of this, not in the design guidelines. But
No, I appreciate that, and I
yeah.
totally get that. I'm just saying that at some point, this committee, or I don't know where to go to bring this point up and to the forefront, but that, to me, is a very high allowable for Carmel. When, as we know, Carmel's urban fabric is small scale, 45% is on the large side. So if this committee, in trying to accomplish these 6 goals, and I know we're not about numbers right now, but where do we go to talk about decreasing that allowable? In the practical world, when you get together with your client, they like to maximize things. So if there's an allowable of 30 or 35, already you're off to the races in accomplishing these 6 goals.
Well, Carolyn,
okay.
I can answer that.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
Carolyn, there will be an opportunity if you want to, so the way this process has been laid out over the whole entire project is we're going to have these drafts out this week. And then we're going to be collecting feedback on the drafts of the guidelines. And while that's going on, we're finishing up recommended edits to the zoning code. And so when the zoning code conversations start happening at the Planning Commission and the City Council, then that'll be an opportunity for someone to make a suggestion. And, on the counter side, you may have someone who comes and said 45 is not enough to build a project nowadays. I can't imagine who would say that, but those would be the opportunities for people to make suggestions or policy points like, hey, can we think about maybe doing this a little bit differently? These bigger sort of things. So there will be an opportunity to throw that out there and see if the decision makers want to make a large policy change like that. Because obviously the 45% has been the way it's been for a long time, and people are very used to it. So it would be a pretty large policy change, but doesn't mean it's off the table for a conversation.
Right, and I'm not able to attend everything, so I just wanted to get my message across to you guys, this very important committee, going forward with a lot of words about scale and small and this and that. I would love for the 5 of you to take that message on to the numerical.
I think, Carolyn, you've done a good job of messaging, because I'm now starting to retain that at the front of my mind, and it does relate to our new principle 5, design every built structure with modesty and restraint. Simple's gone. And I think it's appropriate if, Brandon will help us figure out where exactly the math goes. But linkages to that idea of modesty and restraint, et cetera, I think is exactly where that needs to be. And it does need to be taken seriously and evaluated, make sure we're on the right track mathematically there. So I really appreciate your keeping that at top of mind, Carolyn. Is there any, let me just take it to the committee here for a moment. I don't see any other public comments. Any thoughts? I see Doug turning his mic on.
I want to thank you two for this. It distills it down to make it more readable, more understandable, and particularly the part of taking the disparate thoughts and cutting them in half and putting them in the appropriate heading. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Any glaring or even small? Okay. Don, your thoughts?
Thank you. I've been wondering when this draft is going to come.
Are you on?
I was. I turned it on.
Maybe I messed it up.
Hello.
Okay, there you are.
I propose one quick edit.
Yes.
4.0, retain and build upon Carmel established architectural heritage. We've killed two adjectives, killed one more. Kill established.
Okay, what do you want?
Build upon Carmel's architectural heritage.
Okay. So I think, personally, I think at some point when we see the draft, there will have to be some definitions of architectural heritage. I don't think it's that important that there's an adjective there or what kind of adjective it is, but maybe we can work that out when we see what the fleshing out of that architectural heritage means.
Nori and I had a conversation about this yesterday, and I don't know, Nori, if you want to weigh in on your thoughts about that. How we're going to establish that architectural heritage. We had talked about, the context statement and all that stuff. I don't know, did you want to offer something on that?
Good morning. I think we have included quite a bit on architectural heritage in both drafts, both in terms of including now an abbreviated historic overview as well as a summary of some of the key styles and what some of their defining characteristics are. And there is a section, although it's brief, on heritage. So we'll really look forward to everyone's comments on that to see if that addresses it adequately. I think in that memo acknowledge that I want to go back after the draft is out to look to see if we really hit it head on directly. There's a lot of new information that establishes a foundation for a better understanding of architectural heritage, which wasn't or doesn't exist in the current guidelines. But I think a couple of head-on definitions still will be needed, as Victoria's noted.
And
That's it.
Yeah, thanks, Nori. And for what it's worth, I want to add, sort of the kudos that everyone's piling on. I really like, Nori and I were having a conversation just yesterday about the draft. We talked about having these boxes along the way that point to, the guidelines that you're going to find in that section. And we were saying we should have a word. Each little pointer should have a word that people can remind. So you did exactly what we were trying to find something to do. So thank you for that. And I can see this sort of format maybe even being at the start of the document as a linkable table. So you can see all the guidelines up front, and then these will all be hyperlinks possibly to inside the document. So you can go straight to these sections, which, these will change, a little bit.
Yeah.
But this format is it's great.
Okay.
This is really useful. So thank you for both your efforts on doing this.
I tested myself, and I just okay, preserve, subordinate, fit, retain, design, detail. And I thought, oh, now I understand it, finally. So it was really like a self-test. This whole thing has been a self-test, but also a test for the rest of us to see how we can make it feel more natural and accessible. So I'm glad we're moving in the right direction. It's not done, of course, but at least we kind of have like I said, a way or a warm-up for, to help us going forward. If there are no other...
Just to reinforce that, you will see in the draft, at the beginning of a section of a particular design topic or grouping of topics, there is now a box that reiterates which of the guiding principles relate to that section. And we, as we speak, I'm putting in those abbreviated active verbs in that box, along with the reference to the number of the guiding principle. So this is real-time editing going on right now.
Well, that's good. I think Don was trying to get my attention.
Yeah, the one item that Mayor White brought up about percolation, I think it's terribly important. And also related to that is using modern permeable paving. We don't mention that.
Yeah.
So I think we need to get that percolation in there.
I agree.
It's so important in preserving the forest.
Well, we're noting, so just again, maybe this gives me an opportunity to clarify that Melanie and I restrained ourselves from doing anything that altered the wording of these old principles, because it's just, the old subheadings, because we don't have the new ones. It's not what the exercise was about. So, but we did take notes, like about percolation and FAR and other things, that when we see the final or the initial guideline draft, then I think is the time to do that triple check.
Yeah.
Is the stuff in there? Is everything in there? As what Nori just said, is everything beefy enough in where it needs to be beefed up? So.
And when do we get that guideline draft?
Okay, let's segue.
Let's get to agenda item number 5.
Let's segue into agenda
Finally.
number 5.
I've been waiting 3 meetings for this.
Any other quick comments on this exercise, or can we move to what we have, the last item agenda? Go ahead.
Don't
Or
you think
second
we
to
should
last?
have consensus on this before we move off?
Yeah, that's a good idea. There's
Do
5
we-
of us. I'm taking it as a consensus that this is a good working draft.
Very good.
Very good working draft.
And I just to respond
Yeah.
to Don's concern about percolation, there is something in here, we discussed it yesterday,
Yeah.
and I think there's something in here about it. I can't recall where it is, Don, but it's in here, and it was duly noted by Roberta and me, because percolation is something
Victoria,
that,
you mean?
I mean Victoria, thank you. Victoria and I were concerned about that, and we listened to what you and Ken said yesterday, and so we highlighted it. It's in here somewhere.
Yeah.
And also remember that these are the headings,
Right.
and under each heading are multiple bullets that get into
Exactly.
more detail, and those bullets also contain language about making
Exactly.
sure that the water can get down through permeable surfaces and things like that. So it's in there. We'll make sure that, you know, when we're all going through the draft,
Exactly.
that we're looking to make sure it's strong enough. But I assure you that even the original guidelines from 25 years ago have take care of percolation.
That's right. And Doug is leaning in. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, I just wanted to suggest that it might be helpful as we progress if you would reach out to Mary Ann
Yes.
and make
good
sure
idea.
she has a copy of this and
Good
maybe
idea.
have a
Brandon, would you-
discussion
Yeah,
with her.
I
Yeah.
can take care of that.
We've got this this Brown Act compliant working, but Brandon could do it. So thank you, Brandon.
Of course.
Okay, so we're going to move on to finally to the penultimate item, and we do have to be out of here by 5 of noon.
Correct.
Because there is a school group coming in to do their mock City Hall stuff. So, but I think we have a shot at it. And I'm not going to continue the meeting again, so let's move along. Number 5 is receive updates on consultant and staff work products. And so we do have, that you all may be able to see online, and I see a hand up, hold on. Janice, I'll get to you in 1 second. And there's also a handout here in the room today that notes from Nori. So we're going to go over that, and also whatever Brandon needs to say, and you can tell me which order you'd like to do that in. But also, I just want to, Janice, did you put your hand back down, or are you?
No,
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask that, that Brandon display the document so that we can see it.
Okay.
Which document?
Are we talking about the Nori winter document?
No, the one that you're talking from right now.
Oh, the draft. Well, we're moving on off of that topic, but we can, do you need, we're not going to be discussing it going forward. Do you want to
Okay.
just get an email of that or a link?
No. What I'd like to see what you're talking from.
Okay. All right, so then it would be the
Thank you.
Nori document, I guess, would be, if it's possible to put it up, because that's what we're going on to. That's the only other exhibit we have going forward. So Brandon, what do you think? You want to tag team go first, have Nori go first? It's up to you.
Yeah, Nori, why don't you go ahead and go first and talk about your notes? That'll give me a second to pull it up on the screen.
Okay.
So you want me to be talking about the notes?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And just open up that topic for the group.
Well, in the interest of brevity, I tried to summarize my observations from the previous 2 meetings regarding the editing of the guiding principles and how important they are, and I think they really are excellent, and continuing to refine them both in terms of the distilled actual 6 statements, but also, as Brandon has alluded to, how bullet points underneath them can pick up some other detail, perhaps in another section of the draft, which you will see. And I think that you'll see that what we've attempted to do is embed them throughout the draft of the document. I mentioned earlier that as you go through the design guidelines themselves, they're organized into different topics that follow the design review process, the concept level, and then the final design level, as they currently do. But now each of those sections has a sidebar that links you back to the guiding principles that are related to that section. And that is one way that they are sort of embedded throughout the document. I do think that another really key way to use them, yet to be really worked out, is in the design review checklist that's been discussed as a next implementation tool right after the guidelines themselves, because I think asking people in their submittal, how have you met the key principles, is going to be fundamental. And so that's another use of them that hasn't yet been talked about, and it's, you know, that, but that's down the road, and I think it's important to keep in mind. The thing, though, that impressed me is that while grouping them under individual guidelines under the specific topics is really good to figure out where emphasis lies for certain ones, I think the strength of them is that they are so overarching that many different design topics relate to more than one of the guiding principles. And that's the way we've formatted those boxes in the draft that you'll see. So in many cases, there will be a reference to several, 2, 3, 4 guiding principles for a particular topic. And one particular that came to my mind was the one about heritage, which, if you look at it straight on, it only directly relates to a couple of specific guidelines. But what was key to me was the term preserve and build on. I believe it says, I don't have it in front of me, but that idea of building on the heritage actually threads through a lot of the design topics. So that was one takeaway that I got out of those meetings. The others were the need to define a couple of terms more specifically. And context is one, and you will see in the draft that we've taken a shot at that in describing context at different levels and actually illustrating that. But focusing on a key aspect of it, and that is that we're talking about the design traditions of the context. We often encounter the issue of in design review of how do you relate to things that have happened more recently that don't fit in. I've got a house next to me that is there, but it's not really a part of the traditions of the community. And so the heads up to me was, I think we want to make it clear in the draft that we're talking about the design traditions, those things that traditionally established context and not necessarily the outliers, if you will, that exist today. And so we've taken a crack at that because literally we're trying to get the drafts out today. And I was quickly inserting some of that language based on what I heard in the last meeting earlier this week. And so a couple of other definitions, I think, and Victoria's kind of alluded this too, is defining heritage and explaining that more clearly, and even what we mean by design tradition. So some of the fundamental things that we've kind of taken for granted, there's a lot of new material now that I think describes those things, but whether there is actually a punchy definition just yet, I want to hear your comments when you see the draft to see if you think that it's coming across clearly enough. And then I did just acknowledge, as some of you were, that some of the key topics that were raised by the community last time, such as percolation, are indeed addressed somewhere in the guidelines, if not in the old ones. We did pick up several of those comments in the previous workshops, and my hope is that most of those are now pretty well addressed. A couple that I heard that maybe aren't quite well enough addressed is the issue of estate gates and stone columns on fences. And so when you get the draft, I'll be interested to see if you think that's well enough illustrated. What we did do was there are many more photographs of good, appropriate solutions to show both the range of diversity that's appropriate, but also to really drive home some of those basic design concepts. And so I know in particular there's a whole array of photographs of appropriate fences. Whether or not we've really addressed the stone columns enough, I'll be interested to hear. So that's kind of a long-winded summary of what my meeting notes were all about.
Well, I appreciate that. You're you're doing that, Nori. And obviously, we're still all a work in progress. I think you may have buried the lead a little bit by saying that you think the draft might be out today. Don was just asking that. The draft of the first draft of the guidelines. Is that?
Well, I'll be getting it back to staff today.
Okay.
And they'll need to, Brandon caught some formatting glitches and things earlier this week that we're working on right now and cleaning up. But in the process, since I've heard some of this new material, I'm squeaking in a couple of new bits of text here and there. But my goal is to get them to staff today, and hopefully if everything looks good, then he can get them out as soon as he can. I'll let him talk about that.
Okay, that sounds like a segue, Brandon.
I've been segued. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Nori.
So I'll hit the big question. So I have planning commission tonight. If I get these later today, they're not going out today. But I do hope to get them out tomorrow. That's the plan. So everybody can think about that. So I want to back up a little bit, just as kind of walk this through a little bit. So if you remember when we started on this journey together with City Council, there was actually a lot of talk about what the project was called. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was Design Traditions. We started as Design Traditions 2.0, and then there was a conversation about calling it 1.5, and that was really intentional because we realized that this isn't a blow up and start from scratch process. We are, we're polishing, we're refining, we're making better what we have, because we had good bones. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff that existed in the old Design Traditions. Maybe, not the commercial guidelines, which Nori will say over and over again, he was not involved in writing. But that's why we're redoing the commercial guidelines as well. So as you get the drafts, just remember that it's building on what was there before. And we wrote a nice little how to use the draft paper that's going to go with it, like a cover that says, here's what you're getting, here's what's in here, here's what the red font means and all that good stuff. So you'll see that. So where we're at right now is the drafts will hit the street this week. We're really excited to get feedback from the community, from the steering committee. We'll need to work together with the chair and vice chair of this committee to see when's a reasonable time to give you all enough time with the drafts to schedule our next meeting to actually get feedback from you on them. After that, we will then be scheduling another community meeting. So the progression, if you think about it, is that we're going to launch this first draft. And again, remember, this is a first draft. So we're going to go through a bunch of process, community feedback, hearings, and then that first draft is going to get revised. So this isn't even, a final draft that we're going to bring forward to City Council for adoption. We've got a lot of public process left to go, which is how this whole project was designed from the very beginning, to make sure that we're not moving too fast. And I will admit we're a little bit behind. I'll take the ownership of that. I think we got a lot more and a lot higher quality no, that's the wrong way to say it. More dense feedback than we thought we would get from all the community outreach. So that took a little bit longer to get the drafts pulled together. We did receive an internal working draft from Nori, but that, like he said, there was some formatting stuff that we needed to clean up so that when we do launch this draft this week, it's a fruitful exercise with the community. So you're not looking at something thinking, I don't even understand, the formatting here, things like that. So we're really excited to have a clean first draft out there that everyone can review. So we'll start with the community and review. The steering committee will get that feedback. Then we'll move on to a community meeting. That'll be at Sunset Center again. And then we'll go to Planning Commission from there. Again, we're just talking about the first draft. And then the culmination of that is a meeting with the City Council to bring all of the feedback we've received from the community, the steering committee, the Planning Commission, to the City Council, present that to them, and get their feedback as well on the design guidelines first draft. So once we've collected that over what's probably a month and a half span, then we go back and we do a redraft of this. So that'll be the next step, and we'll work with Nori on that, work with the steering committee on that redraft, and then that second draft will go out on the street. So that's just sort of a reminder of the next steps in the process. But yeah, I mean, the big lead, like you said, Madam Chair, is that the draft will be on the street this week.
And as Brandon and I have discussed privately, and many people have conversed with me about, and with other members of the committee probably, there is a lot of fear, I think, that we know Nori's time is limited in this contract. And the idea that somehow the end of the process ends when Nori needs to move on to his next gig is anxiety producing for such an active,
I understand
involved
that, yeah.
community. So I asked Brandon to make more of the comments he's reassured me with, and also council members apparently, and in fact, council members have also reassured me privately that this process doesn't have that hard
That's right.
stop, and that it is in the community's hands to keep going with until it is a satisfactory. And in fact, and I don't want to take all of Brandon's comments, but just so you cover at least this, that there is, he had said this actually 2 days ago, that the idea of a living document is a little more in our minds now than it might have been in the past. And so even if the council, for example, adopts something, it could still be a provisional, thought of as provisional, and then more is coming. So that was my
No, thank you for that tee up.
lob
Actually,
over
you and
to
I had talked
Brandon.
about that, and I
Yeah.
didn't get into that yet, so thanks for teeing me up for that. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, Nori Winter is fantastic. He's a wonderful human being, incredibly intelligent, does a wonderful job, but this project doesn't lie solely on his shoulders. So the work that the city has hired Nori to do is to help us redraft the guidelines, the commercial and residential guidelines. And that project, I'm fully confident we will get to in a form that we'll have a final product that we can, massage with city council and the community and all that by the time that Nori's contract is over. There's still plenty of work to do, like the chair said. We're going to have that next steps document that we're collecting. Things like the landscaping ordinance. That's on the similar track, but it doesn't stop when Nori's contract stops. So I think that's really important to remember. And I do feel really strongly, like I said at the last meeting, that these types of documents should be living. That's the way that they're most effective. Is you need to be able to adjust to, either you missed something, it's not strong enough, it's too strong, there's something new that comes out, with all the new green initiatives over the next 10 years that we're probably going to see in the state of California. We'll probably have to adjust this. There's no way this can or should sit on a shelf for another 20 years after we're done with it. So I absolutely see it as a living document. And you're right, completely right, Madam Chair, that the project does not essentially die or stop when Nori's contract ends. I'm fully confident we can get the work out of Nori and with Nori that we need by the time his contract is over with this most recent extension that we've done.
Thank you, Brandon. And we'll talk more about that and how that's going to happen in future meetings. We only have 10 minutes till the kids come in, 10 to 12 minutes. So I just want to have a quick out to the public about, or did I already do that?
What?
No, I think you need to do that still.
I did?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Brain glitch. About number 5, which is the receipt and update on consultant and staff work products. And I see you leaning forward, Mayor White, and this is where you had made a comment earlier on 2 days ago, and I said it was going to be here, that we'd deal with it, so here we are.
2 days later.
Well, gee, thank you for publicizing this. I'm glad you're going out at 12 because I'm part of the student thing coming in. I got a feeling you were trying to answer my question just a minute ago. My question was, have you a chance to see the original documents that Nori sent? And I think I got an answer there. You were talking about fencing last time. Mm-hmm. I hate to go back, but if you want to see a design that doesn't fit anything, go down, do some homework, drive down to Casanova between 8th and 9th, and then count 4 houses on the west side, and you will see what we call it the Fort Casanova. And you'll get a clearly understanding how something B before Brandon, BB, got okayed. So this is the kind of thing I'm concerned about, is the fencing, the gates, that type of thing. That's the first thing you see when you drive down the street. Thank you.
Ken. Mayor White, was that, but you said between 8th and 9th on Casanova?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 4th house starting from 8th down. You can't miss it. It's
At some point,
Can't miss it.
we should have a greatest hits list. Okay, thank you, Mayor White. Don, do you want, or anyone else from the public on item 5, which is the consultant and staff work products? We still have a pile of minutes that we've not had a chance to go through.
Landscape ordinance.
landscape, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
What's the
want?
status of that?
So the status of landscape ordinance is I'm still working with trying to get a consultant on board for that. We had our really productive meeting here to get feedback from you all about what you see the landscape ordinance accomplishing. I've had some meetings, and I don't want to break any trust or confidence with contractors that I'm speaking with about contract negotiations. But I've had some meetings, and so we're still trying to find a middle road where we can bring someone on board and still sort of meet the budgetary restrictions that we have from City Council. So I'm hopefully going to be in front of them soon at the next meeting. I had hoped to be there yesterday, but that just didn't work out. But like I said, rest assured, the landscaping ordinance is on a same but parallel track with the work we're doing on the design guidelines. And certainly doesn't rest on the shoulders of having to happen at the exact same time that the design guidelines do.
Anyone from the Zoom room have any? I don't think I explicitly said that earlier on item 5, which is again consultant and staff work products. Anyone else from the committee? Yes, Melanie.
Brandon, on the landscape ordinance, you mentioned that you're meeting with some contractors, so you're obviously meeting with several people, and can you give us any idea of like the parameters? Are there time issues? I mean, what would be the issues of concern trying to get somebody on board? Because it seems like, and I know how stretched thinly you are, get some kind of time frame about how we're going to start working on this so that we can, in our minds, be integrating our concerns and for landscaping and our ideas and so forth, so we can start getting those together. Because my biggest concern, and I know that's a concern of a lot of others up here and out in Zoom land as well as the audience, we're just so concerned about time frame, and that we seem to be lagging behind our calendar that you and Nori had given us. And it just seems like we're going to be all of a sudden at one point in this whole process, we're going to be presented with a bunch of material and no time to really thoughtfully and carefully review it. So can you give us a little bit more idea on that?
Well, bear in mind, I mean, for what it's worth, bear in mind that the landscaping ordinance, if you remember from the city council meeting, that's not necessarily a steering committee project. I mean, we did come to the steering committee to talk about what the steering committee sees getting out of that landscape ordinance project, and the steering committee requested that city council approve a contract that staff could bring on a consultant. But I think if your fear is that you're going to get a bunch of work, on a routine weekly basis about the landscape ordinance, that's not really how it's going to go down. So. We're working to get a consultant on board. Like I said, I don't really think it's appropriate to get into, what the holdups are, what we're negotiating.
No,
but,
I'm not interested in
yeah.
that. I'm not interested
Okay,
in that.
sorry, maybe I
I'm
misunderstood
concerned
the
about-
question.
All I'm concerned about, and you just said something that is a further concern, that we're not going to have any input, or we're not going to be involved with
Not that you won't have
design.
any input, but just recall the meeting with the city council. This isn't an add-on to the steering committee's work. If you remember, they directed staff, and they said they wanted to be the ones to select the contractor.
Well, of
we came
course.
here, and that the project itself is actually a city staff, forester, when we have a forester back in place, planning staff, working with a consultant. So it is not necessarily a steering committee project. I fully intend on coming here intermittently to get feedback on where we're at, but it's not something that's solely on the shoulders of this committee. So I don't want you to be concerned that it's going to be an overly burdensome task on this committee.
Okay, thank you.
We have, I'll say one comment about that, which is that I think this process from the very beginning has had within it built-in conflict that we've discussed since April, which is an understanding that the citizens who volunteer, whether it's in the room or in the Zoom room or here on the steering committee, believe, I think correctly, that in a deliberative democracy, we are the top of the pyramid. And then there's the council that we elected to represent us. This is an arm of the council, and then we have staff to support the efforts. So this is a philosophical problem that sometimes rears its head. And all I can say from my standpoint as a citizen who lives here and loves this place, and I know I think I speak for everyone, you know, all the influence and power comes from the citizens. And you know, as long as we all have energy to give our input, then we will make sure that we are heard. So we don't need formal structures or legislative acts to make that happen, and nor do we need legislative imprimatur to tell us whether or not we're in charge. So please feel reassured that all of us have the freedom in this country to express ourselves from here on out.
Yep. And I do plan, I mean, like I said, my vision is to bring it iteratively to this group. Like, it's not separate from this process, but I heard your concern that it's going to be, you know, more added to your work, and that's going to hinder our schedule. But you'll definitely be involved in it. Don't worry.
I'm not worried about
Workload.
That you know, we spent 2.5 hours yesterday intensely working on what we delivered today. None of us are worried about the workload. What we're just worried about is getting things in a timely fashion so that we can responsibly respond to things.
Sure.
And we understand your workload too. We really do. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff that's
above and beyond.
Allocated to you that's above and beyond.
Yes.
What can reasonably be handled by one person all the time. And so don't misunderstand that we don't realize what you're up against. I mean, like this week for you, every time you've got a council meeting and a planning commission meeting, it's very stressful because there's a lot that has to be done in that 1 week. And it's not like you don't do anything in the other 3 weeks, but it all builds to the crescendo of the meeting.
Thank
and
you
so
for
we
that,
get that. We've all been around long enough and been involved enough that we really do understand that. But what we're most concerned about is we have been told time and time again that we have to stay to a schedule. We've got this schedule. And we sit here, we haven't seen Nori's work product, and we haven't seen your work product on what Nori passed on to you. So given the fact that we've been notified about the timeline that's, clicking all the time, we just are concerned about, how we're going to be able to do the best job for the public. And something that we're proud of, because you might think that your head is on the block, but we feel that we represent the public and the council, of course, because they are supposed to represent the public too. But the point is that we want to give our very best shot at everything, and knowing that we have, the time to do that. And so that's all I'm trying to say to you. So I hope
I hear you. Thank you for that.
it.
Yeah, I do. And, I really do. I mean, I hope it comes across sincerely. I do believe we have enough time. And when the drafts go out this week, if, you look at them and you're like, hey, we need an extra week, or we're not going to rip them out of everybody's hands. There's not a buzzer that goes off after 2 weeks, says, oh, you're done. No more comments. So if we need to extend some review times, we will. I mean, this does need to be done thoughtfully. It needs to make sure we get everybody's input that wants to provide it. And I'm totally committed to that. Believe me, I promise you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else in the room does too.
And we do have kids coming in seconds now. We have item 6 is upcoming agenda items. I think that's probably obvious that it's going to be the draft guideline that we need to look at, that's going to be the next thing. I have to say that given, again, the limitations of this room, and as an architect, I'm very sensitive to the physicality of my workspace, which stinks, frankly, sitting up here. If you could see this. So there's nothing we can do about that right now, but I do think it was very useful, and I'll just float this out here, for Melanie and I to sit with lots of space, my entire living room, and have the ability to do that. And it might, this is something to put a pin in, I might start thinking about some work groups as a subcommittees so that people can actually have the collaborative experience that she and I had yesterday, which helps people think, in my opinion. I like to collaborate with people to help me think. And so we might be using that as a tool for efficiency. We'll see if that helps. So obviously all within compliance of the Brown Act. So let's make a timely conclusion to this.
So Madam Chair, before you close
yes?
the meeting, we're not adopting minutes this meeting then?
We
We'll
can't,
just
I'm
do it
afraid
next
we
time.
can't,
Yeah,
it's
that's okay.
too much,
They're
yeah.
still there, yeah, that's
Oh,
fine.
Doug, you have one more comment?
Future agenda item?
Yes, go ahead.
At the December meeting, Don raised the issue of the condition of the urban forest in the downtown and wanted us to transmit correspondence to the council about our concerns.
Okay.
I have a draft letter.
Okay.
I've been withholding it because there is a citizens inventory going on of the tree conditions downtown, and it's supposed to be concluded this week, so that'll provide numbers to put in the correspondence. So for
So
maybe
for the next meeting, that sounds like a quick
Yeah.
one we can add to the agenda. Anything else that is springing to mind for folks that could be added to an agenda that's going to be primarily about the draft guidelines, but could certainly host other things? Okay, but that's all for now. Let's let the next generation come in. We'll be in charge long after we're gone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for